Hey guys, Mike in the Woods here. Now, as you know, one of the main focuses on this channel is something I call skatepacking, which is essentially backpacking on an electric skateboard. I think it's a very underrepresented backpacking subgenre, and as the popularity of electric rideables starts to exponentially increase, I think these sorts of trips are going to explode in popularity. I'm doing a whole series of videos on how to prepare and get set for a skatepacking trip, so check out the link at the top of the screen and in the description if you want to find out more. When your daily distance is tied to the amount of range you can get out of your electric skateboard, knowing every trick in the book to squeeze just that little bit more of range out of your battery is super useful. And in today's video, 10 tricks to help you do exactly that. Number 10, using the appropriate wheels. Electric skateboards primarily come with two types of wheels. You've got all-terrain and street. Street wheels are your standard solid urethane meant for paved surfaces, and all-terrain are either inflated or airless style off-road tires meant for off-road riding. Using all-terrain wheels significantly impacts your range, so don't use them if you won't need them for a particular skatepacking trip, and if you do, make sure they're at least properly inflated, as underinflated tires can unnecessarily increase surface friction, which, as you guessed it, cuts into your range. Number 9, keep your bearings cleaned and greased. Your bearings are the contact point between your wheels and your trucks. You get the best performance when they are clean and properly greased. Over time, especially if you're riding on dirty surfaces like gravel or sand, grime can build up in the bearings, reducing their performance and even potentially permanently damaging them. Make sure you have clean bearings before you start a trip, and if your trip is going to take, over a week, consider having a way to clean and re-grease them while on the go, or plan pit stops at skate shops for them to do it for you while you take a 0 day. Alternatively, you can bring an extra set of bearings to swap in if your active ones get too gunked up. Number 8, minimize hilly routes and overall elevation gain. This might be hard to do depending on your particular trip, but if possible, reducing these factors will reduce the strain on your eskate's motors, and the less strain on the motors, the more efficient they'll be, and nothing strains motors quite like steep hills. Even though you get regenerative braking on the downhill segments, plus the, free boost from gravity, it won't equalize the extra battery spent going up the hill in the first place, as well overall elevation gain throughout the day will have a small but noticeable effect on your range. At the very least, try to avoid steep hills. Number 7, reduce your wind resistance. If you've talked to athletic cyclists before, you know they love the topic of aerodynamics, and for good reason. More wind resistance means more effort to get from point A to point B. There's two primary components to this. There's the obvious fact of riding into the wind, with the wind blowing in the opposite direction that you're traveling, and the second being your cross-section and drag. Try to minimize wide dangly bits from your pack, and having an open jacket can really catch wind and almost act like a parachute in how badly it can slow you down. You don't have to get too crazy here, just keep in mind some basic aerodynamics. Number 6, keep weight as low as possible. There's two key factors here. The first and obvious one is your pack weight. Just because your e-skate is doing all the work doesn't mean it isn't just as important to try and keep the weight down as much as possible. I went on an overnight skatepacking trip, and with 40 pounds of backpacking gear, my battery's range went from a normal 25 kilometers down to 20, just based on that extra backpacking gear. The other aspect of this is your own weight. And look, I'm not passing judgment here. I'm not exactly a pro athlete myself. But simple physics dictates that the heavier you are, the harder the battery has to work to cover the same distance. And this will be one of the biggest contributors to your range. Just something to keep in mind. As a frame of reference, I'm just over 250 pounds, and my backpacking gear weighed about 40 or so. My total load on the board for my overnight skatepacking trip was roughly 300 pounds, and at that weight, I was getting 20 kilometers out of one of these batteries. Number 5, ride on lower speed settings. Not only is it much safer and give you more time to actually enjoy the sights, but lower speed settings are much more efficient for your motors, by a significant margin. They're most efficient at the slowest speed setting and least efficient at the fastest speed setting, but by no means am I telling you to ride at a snail's pace. Try to figure out a happy balance between covering ground at an acceptable rate and getting as much range out of your battery as you can. Remember, you're on a backpacking trip. It's not a race. You're not trying to get to your destination as fast as possible, unless, you need to get to a motel or a campsite before a certain cutoff time. Number 4, warm up your battery before you ride. Those who have been out in the woods in winter will know cold really screws with electronics, and specifically it's the lithium-ion batteries, the same kind that your electric skateboard uses. Cold really makes your battery much less efficient and uses up quite a lot more juice to cover the same amount of distance, to the point that, under freezing, you can get to the point where you're only getting about half of your expected range. What most don't realize though is that this is only in place while the battery is cold. If you warm it up, it goes right back to performing as expected. On a particularly cold night, I recommend keeping your batteries in your sleeping bag to keep them warm until you need to plug them in the morning and start riding. As the day warms up and the resistance heating from the juice getting pulled from the battery, it should retain heat enough to minimize any effects from the cold. Number 3, be gentle with acceleration, especially from a standstill. Inertia is the enemy of movement. Hitting the accelerator from a dead stop is one of the most inefficient things you can do with your battery, because overcoming inertia takes a lot of juice. To overcome this, I highly recommend making a habit of pushing from a standstill up to a reasonable coasting speed before you hit the accelerator on your remote, and be light on the acceleration to get you up to speed. Don't jackrabbit up to full speed if you have no need to. As well, try to minimize how many times you need to brake and then accelerate. Although electric skateboards use regenerative braking, the flatter the speed curve you can get it, the more efficient you'll find it will be. Number 2, the first 80% of charging takes half of the charging time. Charging a battery is not a linear line. Charging for half of the time will not net you only 50% of your total charge. A lithium-ion battery charges much faster close to empty than it does close to full. In fact, the first 80% of your battery charge takes half of the overall time it takes to charge to full. It drops off significantly after that, taking the remaining half of the charging window to charge the last 20% of your battery. If your particular trip has many opportunities to charge, you can take advantage of this to severely cut down on your charging time throughout the day on skatepacking trips by having many smaller and much shorter charging stops throughout the day. Having 3 1-hour stops sounds a lot better than having 2 to 3 4-hour stops. Plus, you can still benefit from fully charging overnight at relevant accommodations. And number 1, stick to smooth surfaces as much as possible. Terrain makes all the difference. 30 kilometers on paved trails may turn into only 10 to 15 kilometers while negotiating beaten down mountain bike trails or 20 kilometers on gravel. Even things like sidewalks with the segments between the sidewalk slabs will impact your range. To get the best possible range, stick to smooth, well-paved surfaces whenever possible, including avoiding widespread road debris and especially sand. Even if you have all-terrain wheels, you'll still get maximum performance this way. And because I love you guys, I'll give you 2 extra bonus tips. Use fast chargers to charge up as fast as possible, and the second is don't be afraid to carry your e-skate for a while if you're worried you might not get enough range to reach your next charging spot. You can also tie it off and drag it behind you like a pulk or something if that works better. So there, 10 tips plus 2 bonus tips to help you maximize how far you can get on a single charge with your electric skateboard. Altogether, these can have a crazy amount of influence on how far you can get on a single charge and will greatly influence your planning for a skatepacking trip. So to sum it up, the points are: use appropriate wheels, keep bearings cleaned and greased, minimize inclines and overall elevation gain, reduce wind resistance, keep pack weight down and mind your own weight, ride on slower speed settings, warm up your battery if it's cold, be gentle with acceleration, especially from a standstill, take advantage of the 80% 20% charging curve, stick to smooth surfaces, use fast chargers, and carry or pull your e-skate when relevant. I realize this might seem really overwhelming to try and keep all of these factors in mind when planning for a trip, but I promise you it's not really that bad, and when in doubt, always build a buffer into your planning. If you can go around 100 kilometers before needing to recharge, make charging stops for like 60 kilometers instead. Something to that effect. If you want to learn more about skatepacking, check out the videos linked in the description. And if you're new to the channel, I'd take a look at how fun, futuristic technology can be integrated with traditional outdoors experiences like electric skateboards with backpacking. So check out my other videos and consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next video.